Yeah. Okay, sounds good. I will use this then. Normally I don't need it. But thank you. What I wanted to do is that as we look at drone technology, the interface between that technology and IT is becoming more and more critical. And we are just at the beginning of where it's going to become a landslide for you guys, unfortunately. So what I want to do is share with you a little bit about what's going on in the early adoption of UAS technology, drones. I like to use drones. Some people don't like it because they think about the big Predator drone and dropping bombs. The drones that we do don't do that. Although I just had to change Oregon legislation so that we could go and dart wild animals from drones because that was against the law. And so we had to get that changed. What we want to do is just kind of talk to you about what we've done. Basically, as everybody has seen, drones have started to make their presence known on university campuses pretty aggressively over the last 3 or 4 years. The deluge of the recreational drones has really caught on, and now what we've seen is that faculty, the research community, the marketing and promotion folks, everybody and their dog are saying, oh, I could use a drone to do video capture to either market my program or to enhance my research objectives. So what happened with that is that at the same time the FAA said, yes, you guys want to fly drones, but y'all have to be pilots to fly a Cessna or a 747 before you can actually fly a drone for commercial or official use activity. And so we had a real dilemma here, is how could we use this technology without going and hiring a bunch of pilots? Everything has changed over the last year. And basically what I'm going to show you is how we're allowing folks to fly under a couple of different mechanisms that make it possible for the non-aircraft pilots to be able to operate in this. Just to give you an example here, this is before we actually got to where we have all of our authorizations, but the kid there in the middle is an undergraduate student. His name's Ben. Ben grew up building drones, and I brought him on board as my technical guy. Unlike Victor, I'm not allowed to fly because I will make my drones disappear and land them in water and places like that. I'm the compliance guy and just organizing folks, and I let other people fly. But one of the things that we did is in order to get around, and I will use the term get around the FAA regulations, to allow Ben to fly research projects and other projects for our university, we put him in a GIS 1-credit class last summer and said he's going to map our football stadium. Because of the education use and because it was for GIS, not how to fly, we could actually let him go run with it and capture all sorts of data that people could use for other purposes as well. So this is the team out here with one of the big multicopters that we use for that project. Just a little bit of background on where we've come. Basically, we went live with a full compliance system last May, June of 2016. Since then, we've actually logged over 300 missions using drones, from everything from doing URM marketing video for the university about our new Marine Studies initiative, to whale watching, to what's the crazy, the new interesting one. I actually have a drone that's in a backpack, a new drone that folds up, that they're taking out, and they're on the border of Oregon and Nevada, and they're hiking around and they're monitoring bighorn sheep and doing all sorts of analysis. One of the things that Victor's college in agriculture, we're looking at the different applications of saying, okay, let's go fly over a field with a special camera that only captures spectrum in this frequency. What happens at that frequency is what this blight on wheat emits, and so we can target down to the 1/4 acre of where we want to put an application of a pesticide versus happening to do the whole field. So all of these different types of things are going on there. One of the big things that we did, though, is that My first day job at OSU is I'm the export compliance officer for the university. I've never taken a pilot's class. I didn't know about FAA rules and regulations 2.5 years ago. And it was just basically the vice president of research says, Mark, you're our tech compliance guy, figure it out. The first thing I did is said, I know that I can't do this. So we went and got a consultant company that happened to be located in Corvallis to help us write our SOPs, our policies, and put this all together. With that, the interesting thing that you'll see here in a little bit is that I also said I don't want to have to manually talk to everybody about what they want to do. I want an online system to manage flights and compliance and the data flow that's hopefully going to happen from this. And so I found an Australian software company that had a good tool, and we brought them in, put them in touch with our consultant. They've actually created a new Oregon company. Already employs nearly 10 people, providing a software solution to the drone industry and particularly higher ed. So it's a great way to be compliant, show the FAA what you're doing, and move it forward. As you'll see here, the thing that terrifies me most is that we have a lot of drones at OSU. We are probably over 50 drones at this point. The amazing thing is that none of those are above 55 pounds. These are all commercial consumer-grade drones, with the exception of the one down here, the honeycomb. That's really not a commercial grade. That's more of an agricultural application. With these small birds, we are flying all sorts of applications for the research community. So my researchers think of these as the cool next thing to a bench microscope, and they treat it that way. And I go, no. We got to treat this as you're taking out a car from motor pool. We need to get you guys certified and licensed and authorized to use it. You need to know how to do it safely. And I think that equivalent of using motor pool is a great way from a compliance perspective to get people in the right mindset. And the nice thing is that we've seen great adoption. I had a bunch of cowboys out there doing all sorts of things that kept me up at night. We've got that pretty much under control. And now we're able to go and monthly I do a report to the FAA saying, here are all of our flights for the month. They love it because they can see that we're doing it under the rules. We actually certified 50 pilots so that we have our own program that we can certify folks under. The big thing here in your guys' world is the data. As you're going to see here, and I'm going to turn it back over to Ed for a minute here to talk about this, is each one of these drones has a 4K camera on it. And that may be just one of the cameras. In fact, I should go back here. So this camera up here underneath the bridge is called the SenseFly Albris. This one drone has 8 cameras on it. It does multispectral, thermal, and visual on a 360 degrees. Well, think about getting 1080p data feed out of that. We flew this one, you're going to see a picture of this, for less than 10 minutes and had over 100 gigabytes of visual data to then work with of video and still photo. Think about taking 200 of those missions in a 6-month period with hours and hours worth of data in multiple formats. We're looking at, beyond terabytes of data that the research community is going to have to start managing. And then we start looking at our different state and federal rules for data retention policies. Which data needs to be housed where and for how long, who has access for it. We actually, in the state of Oregon, have a requirement to, on our drone page, have a link to our retention policy so the public knows where all of the data that we capture might be housed as well. So there's a bunch here that's really going to come forward to the big idea of how are we going to have the infrastructure in place to handle the data flow, and what does that look like? So Ed, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
I may bounce back and forth with you here, Mark, for certain. So, okay. So, data, right, Mark? I talked to a few folks across the OSU campus who were a little more savvy on the kind of the networking and data side of IT than myself. And I will speak to kind of my initial involvement with this program too, which is another element of kind of the IT community. But they said three things to me: security, logistics, and storage. We have, as Mark said, we're going to be giving and creating and generating tons and tons of information and data. You all need to figure out where we can put this stuff and how we can access it and process it efficiently. A statistic that one of our IT managers shared with me was prior to Oregon State moving its email system to a cloud service, roughly 75 to 80% of folks were pushing their email off to a third-party vendor. And so we're talking about moving potentially sensitive information off to a non-OSU hosted service. So right there we're talking about security issues. As Mark mentioned, these are commercial consumer products, and the consumer market is growing faster than our ability to expand our bandwidth. So research is generating data at an exponential rate, and our ability to address that. I spoke with our network engineer, is behind. So scary, I guess, but you know, we know that we have work to do. There's work to do in that area, and so in the logistics part of it, Mark, you've actually talked more about using data as opposed to wireless or fiber or things like this. So, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. A couple of things that I'll point out here. Again, when I talked about the data crunch, here's an example of this one drone doing a bridge inspection. But the challenge here is not only the storage of the data, but it's actually the processing of the data. When I talked about that 100 gigabytes of data, we actually had to have one server work for 4 days to what they call stitch those photos together to get a 3D image. That's this image right here. So if you were live with this, you can actually go in and drill down to about the 1 foot level on any point in this image to get access. Now the 1 foot level is actually terrible resolution. We should be getting down to the millimeter level for what we want to do. Now think about if we're just at the 1 foot level, we get over 100 gigabytes of data. It took a few days to process those images, and now we want to go down to the millimeter level. Think about the infrastructure demands that are going to be there on that. So number one is that how are we going to, in the basic version of this, which is that take an SD card, throw it in this drone, and then drop it down and physically move the data. Now we want to go the next step. We want real-time feed of the data. And we want two things to happen. One, the industry is moving rapidly away from focusing on the 15 to 50 different drone companies out there that make drones. You're going to see that go down to a very small number very fast. Now what we're going to see is that how are we going to have better image acquisition? What are the sensors going to look like? And then how are we going to process the data preliminary on board so that we only download the data that we need to do the analysis? But how are we going to download it? It's going to be over 5G. Is what we're looking at is that that's really the only viable tool at this point that we can see where we're going to have to start looking at multiple different platforms to capture the data. And then here's the interesting thing is that our 5G network may not be exclusively on towers. A lot of the 5G network is going to be brought to us by drones at 100,000 feet. And as what we're seeing is Facebook, Google, Amazon, all of these companies are looking at drone technology to provide infrastructure services as much as to deliver packages. So we're going to see a whole new dynamic in terms of the infrastructure there, but then how do we get campus ready to handle that infrastructure and then handle that data flow handle that processing of data is a real big question here. Now, Ed brought up something, and I actually going on a webinar later today. Here's the other thing that's just wonderful, and this is the compliance guy talking, is that when we talk about security, you guys are getting faced with one standard and one new definition that's really going to make things messy about our data management and data storage. NIST FSMA requirements are going to hit us all really hard. And this is going to have the standards which basically identify how we're going to be required as a recipient of federal funds to store and secure data. And that'll be everything from student data, because you get federal financial aid, to a research grant in which NSF is funding and is now putting terms and conditions in their clauses that says that you got to follow all the FSMA standards. Now, the extra really icing on the cake that I love to hate is in my world of export controls, now the federal government has a new definition many people have heard for official use only as a designation of data, really a shaky term. They are trying to uniformly identify that as a different, controlled unclassified information is where new data designation is going to come. However, the really frustrating thing is that even though it could be public domain, non-FERPA, non-HIPAA, they're going to require nearly the level of control as if it was national security classified data. So, multiple layers of authentication, encryption on anything that has potentially federally funded or federally owned data on it. So you take that into the fact that you've got a huge dump of data coming, people are going to want instantaneous access to it, and then you're going to have to put layers of security on it. So this is the challenge that you guys are going to be facing, is that how do we bring the nexus of that together and not have people more mad at all of us, either compliance or technology folks, because their computer's too slow. They can't get to their data. I'm telling them they've got to control it in different ways. So there's a whole new world of complexity around this data coming to all of us. Yeah, let me see.
Yeah, let's find out. Okay.
So a couple of things here. I mentioned earlier that I'm a big fan of doing as little work as possible, and that's why I love technology. And one of the big things that we did is that we said, if we have all of these reporting requirements to the FAA, and we know that we want to make sure that there's institutional insurance, liability insurance, so if somebody's out there flying a drone and they're just goofing off, we want the bill to go to them personally, versus if they're doing it for official research or official marketing promotion. So we said, okay, we got to define who's doing what, and the best way to do that is just to log it. And so what we've done is we set up an actual app. Victor's used it a few times. It's kind of funny. I've actually had everybody do this app, and I never use it because I'm not allowed to fly. But basically, it's an app-based system in which we have people go online. We certify people, and as part of their pilot training as a public institution, we can actually certify our own pilots. And with that, we teach them how to use the system. They go in just even a couple of days beforehand, say, here's on a map where I'm going to fly. This is what I'm going to do. This is how long it's going to be. And we let them know, oh, hey, you're really close to an airport. In the case of this airport, you've got nothing to worry about. Oh, you're over here. You need to just call the airport and let them know that you're going to be flying. So we give them all of those tools to do that. The next thing that this allows us to do is then just take all of that data. Now, it's all app-based, and the user has to interface at this point. But the next phase is we're just going to have the drone talk to the computer, download all of the data, make sure that they're in the geofence that they said they were going to fly, so that we can document exactly where they flew. We could actually look at flight patterns. Now, the other big thing that's really cool about this is that we're going to take the next step further. Traditional aviation hates drones because nobody knows how safe anything is. because a engine in a Cessna has been tested, proved over decades. Well, with this system, the next step we're going to be able to do is take all the telemetry data off of the CPU on the drone, download it into the system, and say, hey, this drone motor works well up until it's got 500 hours on it, and then it starts to fail. These LiPo batteries work well up until this point. So one of the things that's doing, and actually maybe of interest to this group, Complier Enterprise, which is this Oregon company, is really looking to work with universities. So all universities have free access to this technology at this point. Yes, they're probably going to do subscriptions at some point, but there are two things that are pretty amazing. If you're an Oregon school, because we help create the Oregon company, you're already on board, and we can get you guys set up. There's also some FAA centers of excellence, and so a big announcement's coming out how this is going to go out to about 18 universities throughout the country. The reason being is that, number one, they're the ones that are going to be flying the most, so we can get this data about how to rely on drones. But by setting up these partnerships with people that are true subject matter experts, universities can really kind of shorten the cycle of needing to learn things themselves. I did not want to have to go develop a policy or a process to allow people to fly out of the ether of FAA web pages. That just sounded really not fun to me. So by utilizing subject matter experts, it's a really good way to get to that point. We look at, even in Nevada, you've got a test range there. The folks at the test range, I'm sure, are willing and are working with most of the faculty that are already doing research in this area. So even in doing institutional policy for folks that may not be working with a test range, there's the opportunity to use that experience. Just a little bit more about it. The other big thing here is that my risk folks and my legal folks love this, because then they can say, hey, we can get our insurance policy to cover the equipment and the people for the liability and any crash data, because we know that we're doing it under the regulations, that we know exactly when they're doing it, we verified it. And so for them and the insurance company, we actually got a massive discount, and normally you have to do a rider for drones. They said, with your system, we're just going to cover all of your drones under the existing system. So with that, they were able to show some additional opportunities there. The other thing that I mentioned, test ranges. Oregon has 3 test ranges. There's another one in Nevada. There's one in Alaska. And we're all kind of part of the same group. This is an opportunity that a lot of people thought universities would be taking significant advantage of. This is really for those aerospace schools that are developing the next cool drone. For a lot of our users, they're going to take a commercial drone, a DJI of some form, they're going to throw a camera on it, and they're going to go collect data. These, like I said, they really do think of these things as new microscopes. These are just another tool to capture more data. And so the FAA mindset about continuing to call these aircraft really is in direct conflict on how our people see it. So we got to find a way to marry that from a compliance perspective, and then from a data perspective for you guys to figure out how we bring that all together. I think that was the main pieces on the system and the program. I think what I want to do now, one more little thing here is that you can kind of go to our webpage for this, but there's lots of different ways that we can allow people at universities to fly. There's now a commercial way. There's what's called the public entity way, the COA. And then we actually have ways of using the recreational rules primarily for students to be able to fly. But one of the things that we want to do is as an engineering school, is how do we get kids interested in STEM? So we're taking our program, and this June we're bringing in, and actually it's not exclusive to Oregon, but we're actually doing a 3-day program for K-12 educators to get them trained up on what are the rules of how to use the technology in the classroom. How can they use it, and what are the applications? I'm going to bring in our robotics program guys, have them show all sorts of cool things about all drones, whether it be in the air, on the water, on the ground. We've got walking robots, bipeds, all sorts of things we're going to bring in to show these educators, how do we inspire kids to use this technology and play with it? And then how do you go use drones in a junior high, a high school program to show them how to use the technology to maybe inspire them to go into higher ed. What I want to do now is that Victor has really been our champion and going out in the community, and he's going to talk a little bit about some of these applications. And we've also got a couple of slides here, and we'll close out with one of the cool items in terms of our research, and we'll go from there.
Thanks, Mark. So they talked about the data stuff, the compliance, all the boring, scary stuff. I get to do the fun, cool stuff. So I'm the Technology and Media Support Coordinator for OSU Extension, and with Extension being a land-grant university, we take the information from the research from the university and pass it on to the communities across Oregon. And believe it or not, with my silly songs has gotten me a lot of attention to the point where I was invited by USDA NIFA to go to the science festival last year, and so this is a picture of me that I was doing out there, flying drones for the kids, talking about drones in agriculture, drones in education, and did some songs and some ventriloquism. So I kind of use all kinds of fun stuff, old technology, with the songs. But I use drones to get kids interested in STEAM education. A lot of people are familiar with STEM. The STEAM is adding the A of art, and that's through the songs and videography, video photojournalism. That's very popular. Just showing the kids how science, technology, engineering, art, and math all are part of the drones. Someone had to design the drone. Someone has to engineer it. Someone has to test it. The technology is. I haven't found any tool that is as engaging as a drone that has all of those different facets to it, okay? The technology, the miniaturization of the technology, and this is incredible. This thing right here is, it has a camera on it, and it does wireless video transmission, and it has an IMU, which helps it stabilize, okay? So it doesn't have GPS yet, but I'm sure it's getting there. I mean, DJI with its Mavic, that's what the one he was talking about that we're taking over to see the sheep. That thing is about when you can fold down the arms with the props, and it folds down to about this size. It can just about fit it in your pocket. That's how lightweight it is. You put it in your backpack. It's smaller than the Phantom DJI, and I think it's going to be replacing that. And they're coming down with a smaller one. It's about this size that will be out soon. So this technology, I go out to county fairs. I do workshops with 4-H where the kids learned how to fly these little ones right here. And this is about $15 online. It comes with a controller, has about a 4-minute flight time, and you can fly it for about 100, 150 feet away from you. So we go indoors, I have them put on some safety goggles and have at it. There's a lot of fun. And at the end of the workshop, they get to take the drone home. So that's really cool. I'm actually leaving early to fly back today because tomorrow I'm at a STEAM event that we're having at OSU where they're bringing K through 12 kids onto campus, and I'll be showcasing drones and some of my songs there too. So drones are really cool. Flying robots, who does not like that? What else? Well, the applications in educational technology, okay? But beyond the cool factor, what can we actually do with the stuff? So video, we're looking at putting a drone out with an archaeologist, videotaping the site. You can't have students going out there all the time, especially K through 12. It's too expensive, but you can put this thing on a site, take video, get 3D mapping of the area, and then put it in an online system where you can actually do a virtual fly-through of the archaeological site. How cool is that? We have another video coming up. Mark, is that the whale one? We fly over whales. Now, you can't, there's some laws against having any vessels, aircraft, whatnot, near whales. but the drones allow us to fly over them safely without endangering them or spooking them. As a matter of fact, there's a drone that's called the Snotbot that flies over when they spray, and it takes that, and then they can analyze it to see what the whale has eaten or whatnot. And so really cool stuff. And the kids are like, oh, that's gross, but cool at the same time, you know? So I get to talk about all these cool technologies. There's another use. This guy is using 2 little drones, have these little cups, and he goes to the lake and does water samples. And they automatically just go to different parts of the lake, sample the water, sends it back to his laptop, and he analyzes it there without having to get in a canoe and, you know, go out by himself. So drones are great for what we call the 3Ds, the dangerous, dirty, and dull work. Flying over volcanoes. You can't fly with a helicopter very close because of the noxious fumes and, you know, the heat. So National Geographic has flown some over volcanoes. They sacrifice the drone, but the footage that you get off of that, you couldn't get it any other way. So really cool stuff. Wireless video transmission from some of the DJI drones are about 1.5 miles away. Now legally, you can't fly that because you have to keep the drone within visual line of sight. And the FAA is working with another university testing that out. Some point in the future, that's going to be allowed when it's safe enough and the technology is proven. But the technology itself is already there. It's just the regulations are trying to catch up. So being able to do that from that distance. Anybody see the drones at the Super Bowl? You know, Intel. That's swarm technology. One of our robotics guys is researching on how these drones can actually interact with each other and fly autonomously and talk to each other and working in conjunction, not with just the flying drones, but they actually talk to ground-based systems. So a farmer could actually have his tractor talk to his drone, you know, and if you were on the ocean, have all of those just interact with each other all autonomously. So really cool stuff. Yes?
I'll add to that the concept of the swarm of drones. One of our researchers in robotics has put me on notice that she has a National Science Foundation grant that in 2 years' time, she needs me to be ready for her to put 300 drones in the air at one time and to go beyond line of sight. So we'll be doing that at one of the test ranges. But we are looking at, you know, we are at just the beginning of what we're going to see with the utilization of this technology.
Awesome. Where are we at on time? 9:12. Okay, so I think it's time for questions. Anybody has questions, whether it be regulations, how to use the technology. Are you guys using drones at your universities yet? Yes, kind of, sort of, maybe? In which ways? Okay. So the question is, because we're recording this, is someone wants to start the program at their university. What are the top 10 things that you would need to be looking at that would be recommended to get their program off the ground, right? I'll leave that to Mark.
So I think that there are a couple of things. One is define the scope of what you need your program to be. If we're talking small commercial grade drones, that's one thing, versus taking out a 200-pound, you know, Ariane Skyhawk. That's a different thing. So that's number one. Number two, policy. That's the number one thing that FAA is going to want to see is have a good policy. Now, I will say that there are many different policies out there. University of Idaho has a really good policy right now. You know, one of the things that we got to look is the dynamic environment of the FAA. And so some of the things that unfortunately got outdated very fast in terms of people's policy. But then again, and this is the compliance guy talking, is that don't embed your process and policy, particularly in this world. Have a good process that allows your folks to utilize this to meet your regulatory requirements. And so policy and process are both important, but should be kept separate. in the dynamic world that we're in these days. Then what I would look at doing is defining what your user environment is going to look like, because I have as much activity and much more problematic activity with my non-research community than I have with my research community. My researchers are pretty good. I tell them this is the rules of the road, they go follow it. Unfortunately, not everybody wants to do that. And so I might have people in student life or rec sports that want to go do stuff, and they just go out and buy a drone, and I shut them down. And so what we need to do is up front define how it is to be able to fly. And so defining how you can fly is the next biggest thing. That's really the things that I would look at there is really define the level of the program you need, what the policies and process are, and how you get someone flying. The unique thing, I think us in the Northwest are at a great advantage to be able to use the technology much more so than our colleagues on the East Coast. Basically, the entire East Coast is a no-fly zone for most drone activity. Just because there's too many people, there's too much population, everybody's close to an airport. So for that reason, we are actually at a little bit of an advantage on that. That being said, we do have to be careful that we need to demonstrate some due diligence to the FAA and get that going. Yeah.
Is it an expectation at this point that higher ed institutions all should have a policy and a compliance officer? And is that a reality at this time, or is that the exception and not the rule?
So is it the expectation that higher ed should have policies and compliance folks on this? No, it is definitely not the standard. We are probably in the top 5 programs in the country in terms of the way we've set things up. I don't know all the programs out there, so I can't say for sure, but we're kind of ahead of the game. Now, we do not have a fully staffed person for this. Basically, I have a student worker, and I do this as one of my 4 jobs that they pay me for. And so, as all of you have the 4 jobs as well. It really, at some point, depending on the level of program, it should. Now, those universities that have been tied to test ranges have full support from traditional aviation folks, but I'm seeing this in export controls. Export controls has been around for 50 years. There are less than 300 programs in the country at universities that I would say meets their standard, and they're all supposed to have one. I think it's going to be up and coming. Other questions?
How long did it take to set all of that up?
I am actually, I'll admit that I am a bull in a china shop, so I got it done faster than is the OSU way that I think is normal. Yeah. I got it done in about a year and a half. But I went from shutting everybody down and having people very unhappy with me. Now, the way that, and I should say that, I didn't shut everybody down. I said, you can't fly. We can have someone fly for you, and we can get you your data. And that was the big thing, is that my philosophy is try to always get to a yes for everybody, even if it's not them doing it the way they think that they should. So it did take us about a year and a half. The big thing is we're still working on policy. I have interim policy in place right now that on both a recreational use and an official use policy. We're just going through policy process, and we're going to formally adopt a single uniform policy here over the summer. And the other thing is look to the other schools that have been there, done that. Like I said, there are some good policies out there that are good templates to start with. There's a couple of individuals that have specialized in this. The one thing I will say on the supposed subject matter experts, be very wary and do your background checks on folks in this industry. There are a ton of frauds out there. These are individuals who are putting up companies saying that we're the best thing since sliced bread because I bought a DJI and I think I know what the rules are. Really vet folks, because there's a lot of bad information out there right now. Other questions?
So I have a small FPV drone here I'm going to be flying. They have a monitor if you guys want to watch and see what that looks like. And if you ever have any questions on how to use drones and drones in education, technology behind it, let me know. I think Mark is going to show that video of one of our research projects.
So what we'll do is we'll close out, and as Victor likes to talk about snot, I like to talk about poop. So this is one of our NSF funded programs about whale watching. One of the big things that we're seeing here in terms of wildlife observation in general is we're able to get new information and new data about wildlife that we never thought possible. As you'll see in this video, it's pretty amazing what we've seen. We've actually identified and observed whales, everything from New Zealand to the Arctic, doing things that have never been seen before. Not in this video, but this same faculty member was able to monitor a blue whale in a nursing environment with her calf. It had never been observed before. Out of the videos that you're seeing here, this is from last summer off the coast of Oregon, they actually say, she talks about this, but the whales do some cool things, like they'll actually do synchronous dives in which they do headstands and feed together in a social environment. No one's ever seen that. And so some of these things that the technology is allowing us to do, and this is the light research stuff. When we start looking at agriculture and bridge inspection, where we're going multispectral, it'll blow your mind what our research communities want to do with this stuff. One of the things at Wyoming, I was at a conference, they were actually using drone technology. Actually, I'm sorry, Idaho State University individual was using drone technology to do black-tailed squirrel population analysis, and they had to get their computer science folks heavily involved in doing an analytics so that they could do an automated delineation between a squirrel and a squirrel hole, because it was counting both of them as items. And so doing all of these things are just, blending the idea of technology, of data analytics, of big data, and really something cool and interesting to get people involved in. So let's go ahead and we'll close out with this, and this is just kind of fun to look at. We'll see if we can get the audio on it as well. Yeah.
Effectively. Well, basically, we're trying to understand how ocean noise is impacting these whales. Increased ocean noise from vessel traffic, from Navy sonar, from oil and gas exploration, all of that might impact the way whales are able to find food or communicate, or over time just stress them out more. We're measuring health by looking at their body condition. So we're flying a drone over the whales and collecting information on how fat and happy they are. And then we also can look at their stress levels by collecting fecal samples. And fecal samples from whales contain a heap of great biological information. We can look at their reproductive hormones, their stress hormones, and their genetics. It's a moment of complete movement on the boat. Everybody goes right into action. Somebody screams, poop, and the driver gets on the engine and drives us right over the sample. Somebody dives for the net, and the other person's pointing and talking about where the sample is in the water. So the whole process takes maybe 20 seconds, But it's a really crucial 20 seconds to get right on the sample before it sinks and to be able to get the right sample. We're able to look at the animal behavior in a completely different perspective. So before in a boat we only could see the animal's surface and then go back under. And now we can watch them from above, again non-invasively, and see exactly what they're doing underwater, how they're moving, how they're feeding. We're noticing that the animals are quite bendy and flexible. They're doing a lot of headstands when they're feeding underwater. And all that information is brand new that we weren't able to collect before.
So thank you, everybody. We'll be around for questions.